Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this talk. I'm Sreeram. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for staying so late in the evening to listen to this. What am I going to talk about today? The particular protocol I'm going to present is a mechanism designed for staking called StakeSure. It has a certain assurance that it's providing, which is stronger than existing proof-of-stake protocols. Before we get to the answer, let's try to formulate the question. So what is it that we're trying to ask? So the first question is, how do we measure economic security? Okay. Sub-part of this question is Ethereum over-leveraged? Is it securing more than it can carry? You don't want this kind of a situation where you're actually trying to carry a load which is much larger than what you can actually afford to. Some subsidiary questions that we will also answer in this talk are, for example, in the Ethereum protocol today, pricing is done via congestion. Block prices form only if there is congestion in the network. So, Ethereum pricing today is congestion pricing. And in a world of plenty, let's say the computational resources available are infinite. How do we price? How do we form non-zero prices? And finally, we ask for a new definition of safety, which is what we call strong cryptoeconomic safety, which is, can we provide unconditional assurances to the transactors in a network that no matter what happens, whether the validator set is good or bad or whatever, you are going to have a certain safety that we can guarantee you? These are the questions we'll answer today. So before we get to this, the question was, how do we model economic security? Before that, let's just take a minute to see what types of modeling of blockchain security are there. Number one, the classic distributed system model, the Byzantine adversary model. Some fraction of nodes are honest, some fraction of nodes are adversarial. They can behave arbitrarily. Wrong model, right? And the question that you ask is, what fraction of adversarial nodes can you tolerate? A second model, which is used to study blockchains, is called the Nash equilibrium model. And the idea in the Nash equilibrium model is you assume that other nodes are following the protocol. Do you have an incentive to also follow the protocol, right? So then you'd call it a Nash equilibrium. Maybe it's not just one node will follow the protocol if n-1 nodes are following the protocol. Maybe you can say that small coalitions of nodes will still follow the protocol if everybody else is following the protocol. This would be the Nash equilibrium model. There's a third model, which is probably one of the most severe models in blockchain, the economic safety model. The model is, we're going to assume everybody colludes together. Everybody is in it together and trying to attack you. Okay. Every staker, every validator, they're all working together against the interest. This is a pretty severe assumption. Like, what might one be able to say in such a scenario? Roughly what you want to say is, even if everybody in the protocol is working together, they have more to lose than they can profit from attacking the system. Okay, so let's define the economic safety model, because we are going to dive deep into the third model today, the economic safety model. So when you try to model a system and try to quantify economic safety, this, I want to give credit where it's due. It's really much of the fundamental of thinking about economic safety comes from the Ethereum research. And several people who built on top of it. Okay, the two quantities that we consider is cost of corruption. What is the cost of corruption? Is this colluding adversary, they're perfectly colluding with each other and they're carrying out an attack, and they have to pay a certain cost. If you can ensure that there is a certain lower bound on the cost that they have to pay in order to carry out a successful attack, we call that the cost of corruption. It's the minimum cost incurred by the adversary in order to successfully carry out an attack. The other side of this is profit from corruption. What is profit from corruption? It's the profit that can be obtained by the adversary after carrying out a successful attack. You can say it's the maximum profit that can be obtained by the adversary after carrying out a successful attack. So two quantities have been defined, cost of corruption and the profit from corruption. And now we're ready to define what is cryptoeconomic safety. If the cost of corruption is greater than profit from corruption, okay? The cost of corruption, which means the cost required, the cost incurred by an adversary is greater than the profit extracted by the adversary. You can assume, because nodes may be rational, it is a dominant strategy to follow the protocol, not break safety. Okay, so this is the particular definition we're going to use. Cryptoeconomic safety is the cost of corruption is greater than the profit from corruption. Okay, so let's go over these quantities deeply. So what we will do in the first half of the talk is try to understand how these quantities relate to the existing systems. And then the rest of the talk will be in fixing some existing deficiencies in the proof-of-stake protocols. Okay, cost of corruption. What is the cost of corruption in existing protocols? If you do not have a mechanism to impose punishment on this perfectly colluding group, the cost of corruption is zero, right? I do an attack. You assume that the majority of the nodes were honest. Turns out they're all in cahoots together. If they attack, they don't suffer any consequences. Cost of corruption is zero. So in a system with slashing, in a proof-of-stake system with slashing is basically imposing a negative penalty for safety misbehaviors. The cost of corruption is basically the amount of money that you would lose for behaving improperly. And the high-level idea is if you finalize two conflicting blocks, then the nodes which signed on both conflicting blocks, they should not have signed on it. It's attributable that they signed on conflicting things, and you can go and punish them, right? And in typical protocol settings, you can adjust these parameters in various ways. In deployed protocols, this quorum intersection is guaranteed to have at least some number of nodes, 1/3 of the stake or 1/3 of the nodes. So the cost of corruption to attack safety, right? So one caveat that I'm going to place is I'm going to talk only about safety today. There are various aspects, safety, the two major aspects of a distributed system are safety and liveness. Safety means a confirmed thing remains confirmed, and liveness means new honest things do get confirmed. I'm going to talk only about safety. So that's a scope. The cost of corruption. If you want to break safety, even a perfectly colluding adversary will incur this much amount of cost, stake over 3, because you're going to be able to identify stake over 3 fractional nodes and take away their stake. So that's what slashing is. Okay. Awesome. So now the question is, I think till this is part of standard discourse in the Ethereum community. Let's go to the next part, which is what is the profit from corruption? How much profit can an adversary extract successfully by carrying out an attack? Okay, so here's one simple thing. I make a block, perfectly colluding adversary, right? Makes the red block B, and makes an invalid state transition. And by making this invalid state transition, steal all the TVL. TVL is total value lock, which is the total amount of money in the blockchain. Basically, you can go and steal all of it. Suppose you could execute this attack. It's a naive bound, the first bound. Say the profit from corruption is actually the total value locked. Okay, because by making an invalid block, you're going to be able to steal the entire money. And because the entire money can be TVL, right? You can say the profit from corruption is equal to TVL. In Ethereum, let's try to get a sense of these numbers. What is the cost of corruption? I mean, Ethereum has something like $30 billion staked, 33 on the day I did this calculation. And so the cost of corruption is $11 billion, which is a lot of money. But the profit from corruption in this naive calculation is the entire TVL, which is the total market cap of ETH plus every token residing on the Ethereum blockchain, maybe 500 billion. Okay, so the cost of corruption is far smaller than the profit from corruption. Okay, so this seems like a problem. Ethereum is over-leveraged according to this calculation. Okay. Okay, so first observation is invalidity is not, it's difficult to get away for the block producers to make an invalid block. Why? Because most real nodes are also checking, they just don't download the block and see that these guys are saying this is the block, I'm going to accept it. They will also check for validity on their own. Okay, let's assume they do it. Everybody does it, right? So if they do it, then this is not a valid attack. But there is another valid attack, which is the reorg attack. Okay, so what do? It's possible to sign two conflicting blocks, right? In one block, you move all the TVL like to and send it to an exchange. Let's say you send it to Coinbase. In a conflicting block, you move all the money and send it to a conflicting exchange. Say send it to Binance, and you got your money out and got your 500 billion out of Coinbase on the one side and 500 billion out of Binance on the other side. And now you've created a reorg attack, which makes it possible for you to steal. Okay, so theoretically, the attack that I laid out is valid. You could do it. It's just maybe Coinbase doesn't have $500 billion to give you, and similarly with the other exchanges. So liquidity on these exchanges is a certain constraint. But we don't want to necessarily stick to these real practical considerations because we don't know if there's only Coinbase and Binance, or if there are thousands of people who are getting cheated for $1 million each. We cannot know. And we want these systems to be used widely across many individuals. So we cannot assume that it's not possible. So still, we've not made any progress. Profit from corruption may be equal to TVL. Okay, so that's where we are. I'm going to use this table. The idea is I use the naive bound. The profit from corruption is TVL. And the attack is the reorg attack. Okay, let's go further. Can we tighten this bound? Can we actually show that you cannot take out all TVL using these attacks? So the first concept we introduce is called the reversion period. What's the reversion period? It doesn't matter what attack happens in a blockchain. If I had received my ETH in my wallet a month ago, right? No matter what attack you try to do today, it's impossible for you to take my ETH away because nobody is going to believe your block is valid because my block where I received my ETH is confirmed from 1 month back. So what's happening is in practice, there is a certain timeline within which you can reverse blocks, and you cannot reverse longer than that period. We call it reversion period. Reversion period is different from finalization period. What is the finalization period? Finalization period is the time after which a block becomes final. I mean, it's basically you have enough signatures to actually confirm the block. And you know that if this block receives this amount of signatures, if there was a conflicting block which also got finalized, you will be able to find some equivocating nodes, in particular, 1/3 of the nodes being equivocating. But here's the thing, what happens after equivocation? If there were two blocks, right? One block was finalized, and then later another block was finalized. We have two possible chains on which the blockchain can continue thereon. Which one are people going to respect? They're likely going to respect the one they received earlier, right? That's what's going to happen. So, but to do this, it needs to be perfectly obvious to everybody which block was received earlier. Two blocks are near contemporaneous. They're nearly simultaneous. You may have confusions in who received what. So, summary, finalization leads to a certain solidity to the blockchain, but not enough because one, you still can have two simultaneously finalized blocks which are floated in the network. So we define this new concept we call the reversion period. The reversion period is the time after which a block is so entrenched in the chain that it cannot be reverted. Even if there's a conflicting finalized block, that block is going to get slashed and your block is going to continue being in the chain. So what's happening here is what we're saying is blocks which have passed the reversion period are not protected by the validators. Blocks which pass the reversion period are protected by social consensus. So what we're doing here is drawing a boundary and abstracting out all of the social consensus into a single parameter, the reversion period. Okay. So there's some, technical comments I'm going to pass. Okay, so what's happening here is, if there was a blockchain growing like this and there were two like conflicting blocks, it's possible for, us to be confused about which is the correct chain that everybody should build on if they're near contemporaneous. But if you had two chains like here, right, and one chain was produced much earlier than the other chain, then you are going to have the chain that was produced earlier. This doesn't have a laser pointer. The chain that was produced earlier is going to get confirmed, and essentially that's the whole idea. Okay, so now what we can do is to refine our bound a little bit. Okay, instead of saying that the total value in the chain is at risk, we say that the total transaction value inside a reversion period is at risk. Okay, it could be in the worst case that the total transaction value inside a reversion period is the same as trivial, but this is a sharper characterization. Okay, now we look at it and see, is it really that every transaction inside a reversion period is subject to this issue? Then we see that actually that's not true. Not every transaction imposes a certain cryptoeconomic load. So we go into a characterization of different kinds of transactions. So I'm going to present two examples. One category of transactions we call atomic transactions. These transactions have both legs of the value flow happening on chain. Imagine you go to Uniswap and swap USDC to get ETH. Okay. It doesn't matter if this chain got reverted, right? In either of the chains, you either have USDC or you have ETH. It's atomic. It happens together on chain. So atomic transactions do not impose any profit to the adversary because it's atomic. There was USDC to ETH going on here, and on the other side there is, in this side you switch from USDC to ETH. On the other side you still have ETH or USDC. So it doesn't matter which chain gets confirmed, you still have your money, right? So there are on-chain atomic transactions. For example, you go to a Blur or some NFT exchange and swap like your ETH for a Bored Ape, and that is an on-chain atomic transaction. So on-chain atomic transactions do not impose cryptoeconomic load. So we have another characterization of what we call hybrid transactions. Hybrid transactions have one leg of the transaction on-chain and the other leg off-chain. There are two major examples of this category. One is a centralized exchange like Coinbase. Coinbase receives money, which is on the chain, but releases money, which is off the chain. Right? If the transaction that Coinbase thought it received money in, if that gets reverted, Coinbase is out of money. It gave you, it's like, your withdrawal amount of 1 million or whatever. So these are what we call hybrid transactions. One leg of the transaction is on chain and the other leg of the transaction is off chain. These impose cryptoeconomic load against reversions. Okay. So here is a summary. A finer bound is, it's not the total value of all transactions it's not the total value of all transactions inside the reversion period. It's the total value of hybrid transactions inside the reversion period. Only hybrid transactions contribute to cryptoeconomic load. Okay, we've narrowed down even further. What are the big examples of hybrid transactions? We have exchanges, we have bridges. These are two major examples. Real world, Starbucks like payments, right? These would be examples of hybrid transactions. One leg on chain, one leg off chain. Okay, so here's where, is till now is just analysis of what's going on in the systems today. Okay, so this is a bound. It's not clear how useful this bound is, so we need to do more work. So can we reduce the profit from corruption in any known knowable way? Okay, here's a very interesting observation. If we assume that transactions after the reversion period cannot be reverted, why not wait for a transaction why not wait for the reversion period before confirming? So here is a new secure confirmation rule. You wait, just because you receive a transaction and it's finalized, you don't confirm the transaction. You wait for the reversion period and see if there's any conflicting block. If you don't see any conflicting block, then you release the money from Coinbase or whatever the operation is. So, okay, so here is the, if you use the secure confirmation rule, if at least some subset of confirming nodes use the secure confirmation rule, then the profit from corruption reduces even further to what? The total value of hybrid transactions happening inside a reversion period, which are not using the secure confirmation rule. Because if you use the secure confirmation rule, you're secure by definition. Okay? Okay, so we've gotten to this point. So we have a recommendation for what exchanges should use, which is wait for reversion period, at least for large volumes. But here's the number. Okay, so this is the new bound. The problem with this new bound is this bound is unobservable, right? This is the total value of hybrid transactions inside the reversion period using the insecure confirmation. Who knows what these values are? Okay, it's difficult to know. How do we coordinate across these? Even if you knew some value for the bound, how do you coordinate to make sure that you don't exceed this bound? There are different agents applying different confirmation rules in an autonomous manner. So that's what our main solution is, StakeSure, a new mechanism designed for staking, which actually solves these problems. Okay, so I'm going to run through the key ideas in 2 minutes. It's actually simple. So the core idea is, in these systems, you have the notion of slashing, which is when something bad happens, you take you identify the attackers and then burn their money. That's what happens on Ethereum. Instead, here's a core idea. Do not burn, the money in a bonfire, right? Do something proper with it, which is to compensate the victims of the attack. Okay. So what you do with the slash funds is you don't just burn it, you allocate it. Who should you allocate it to? Who's going to get the slash funds? Is you need to give the slash funds to the harmed parties. Who's the harmed party? The harmed party is the one who was assuming the system is going to work and got screwed, right? So that's the harmed party. You need to identify the harmed party and pay the slash money back to the guy. Okay. How do we know who the harmed parties are? How do we solicit this information? Like, we don't want to have a DAO meeting and a general meeting to decide like who the harmed parties are and allocate it. It should be in protocol. How do you do it? Let users self-buy insurance. What is insurance? Insurance is, that a certain portion of the slash money is available to be for compensating the victims. You can go, and when you're doing a transaction, you can declare how much your transaction is worth and pre-buy insurance. So users self-buy insurance. When you buy insurance, you have to buy insurance ahead of the epoch in which you are transacting. Why? Because the insurance transaction needs to be finalized before you know that you can transact safely. So, and you can come up with what we call a rational or a safe transactor policy. A safe transactor policy would be to say that you only transact the amount of hybrid transactions that you have enough insurance to protect you against attacks. Okay, so I think that's the core idea. I'm going to skip all the kind of, there's a lot of details on the system, but the main property that StakeSure ensures is because you're pre-buying the insurance and you know that if your block gets reorged, you are going to be repaid that amount, you get the very interesting property that you get unconditional security. This is a property that has never existed before. Unconditional security. What do I mean by unconditional security? If I'm transacting $100 worth or $1,000 worth of transaction, I know either my transaction went through or I'm going to be compensated to the worth of my insurance. So we call this unconditional cryptoeconomic safety or strong cryptoeconomic safety. So that's what this ensures. It also ensures various other things which are they're not designed for. For example, instead of pricing for computation or some other dimension, you're precisely pricing for security. Why people are buying insurance? To the tune of the amount that they need to transact. This automatically self-scales staking to the right amount. You can do all kinds of interesting things with it. You can get insured like clients, secure bridging, all of these as downstream consequences of this policy. With that, I'll stop. Thank you so much.